I'd like to call to session the Special Ordinance Committee meeting. Ms. Clerk, can we have a roll call?
Committee Member Sneddon.
Here.
Committee Member Jordan.
Here.
And Chair Gutierrez.
Present.
Thank you.
Are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
Are there general public comment about issues not on the agenda?
No general public comment.
Okay. Let's have the staff report, please.
Good morning, Chair Gutierrez. Chair Gutierrez and members of the Ordinance Committee. I am Laura Bridley, the project planner for the short-term rentals. To my right are Rosie Deister, our principal planner, and Brenda Belts, our management analyst, all of who have been integral in writing these ordinances. And we are joined also shortly by the finance department reps on our team, as well as our city attorneys, several of them on the team as well. So welcome back to the short-term rental topic. This morning we have a quick outline for you, which is staff's recommendation, background, very quick, the ordinance committee feedback from April 21st, in which you gave us a number of points to come back with consideration, changes to the ordinance in response to that, and next steps for this program. The recommendation also includes, of course, the short-term rental adoption of a CEQA exemption under 15061B3 and a determination by your committee that the short-term rental ordinances are consistent with the general plan and local coastal plan. Background. This has gone from 4 slides down to 1. The focus here is to create a straightforward and viable permit process, to protect long-term housing, a mandate from your housing element, to inform owners, residents, and visitors where and how vacation rentals may be operated, to allow effective enforcement around nuisance and neighborhood compatibility issues, which has been a struggle for the city for some time, and to offer lower-cost overnight options via our home share model. We've had a number of hearings on this, going back to since I've been on it, August 8th of 25, when I came to your full council and asked for direction to confirm what you had talked about the previous 2 years. Then staff went to the Planning Commission hearings on December 18th for conceptual feedback, returning on March 5th with the full ordinance text. The Planning Commission gave us different feedback. We then proceeded to your ordinance committee on April 14th and April 21st. And throughout all that time, we've been talking to the Coastal Commission all along. This slide provides a summary of what we heard from your committee on April 21st. One was a simple request, which was to include a map of where the ordinances apply with all the information on one map. And, again, this has gone through a variety of changes, but attachment 4 to your packet today provides that. Prohibit the licenses in high fire hazard areas. There was consensus on that from your committee. So that's been rewritten in the ordinance. To reconsider the insurance requirements staff had proposed, to consider ways to ease the parking restrictions in the ordinances, to explain why the number of licenses per owner and operator is limited, also to provide data about the number of permitted STRs we have allowed through the process so far, and also to identify the number of potential sites that could convert to STRs. Another request for information was to describe the permit process for the SDR home share license in a sort of John Q. applicant format. And through all of this, again, the overarching goal is to create a viable permit path for these land uses. I turn next to our attachment 4, which is the home share and proposed STR map. And curating this for people who are maybe unfamiliar with it are magenta area in the downtown area and Upper State Street. That is the proposed inland short-term rental license area and home share area. So the magenta or red area, as well as the purple and the coastal, would allow both home shares and STRs. The green crosshatch area is in the coastal zone, and that would actually only allow home shares. And the addition to this map, particularly from last meeting's request, was to map the high fire hazard areas where any home share or STR would be prohibited. So that takes out quite a bit of areas in Campanile Hill, Braemar Ranch area, the Lower Riviera. So that gives you the picture of what the city's system would allow. In terms of the revised insurance requirements, our prior draft had included a requirement to have the applicant or owner carry extra liability insurance. This is something that had been worked into other agency rules, and it was intended to recognize a potential increase in property damage resulting from transient guest use, and more importantly, to lessen the chance of the city being drawn into those potential disputes as the licensing agency. Staff removed these insurance requirements after consulting with our risk manager and wanted to remind the committee that this is a policy call for council. If you want us to keep it in there, we could, but right now the drafts have taken it out. The next topic was to look at revising the parking restrictions. So the ordinance was revised to remove the parking minimums peculiar to short-term rentals and make them mirror what's required for a single-family or multifamily units. And this is the big give. They're allowing properties that already had non-conforming parking, so maybe you're a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house and you only have one garage, to allow that nonconformity to carry forward as long as you have it documented and verified through a building permit. So as much as our record shows that you're nonconforming in terms of your parking on site, that could remain even in your STR conversion. This photo just shows you an lovely garden court complex down in the coastal license area with no parking on site whatsoever. And under the ordinance today, one of those units could come in and request to be converted to an STR, only one on the property, per other provisions in the ordinance, and not have to provide any parking. Similarly, tandem parking and backing out from the garage are now clearly allowed in the ordinance and would be a benefit to an example like this, which has a garage not even 10 feet from the sidewalk, so there you could have a car in the driveway. It's good or bad. Example of that, again, is in the West Beach license area. The other topic that you wanted us to look at is why we came up with this number of licenses per operator. Why do we restrict it in our previous drafts? And the limitation of the one license per operator was really a way to discourage this becoming an industry in single-family zone districts or multifamily zone districts, to spread it out amongst multiple owners and not have it be an industry of its own. It was used by other agencies as a way to spread out the STR benefit, if you will, in the economy, and also wanted to point out that it may be less likely in Santa Barbara, given the fact that we're being fairly strict in prohibiting them in single-family neighborhoods. Again, this is a policy call for the ordinance committee and council, and if you want to change that, we are not averse to that. You wanted us to clarify the number of STRs that had been approved through the somewhat clunky process called the conversion of use process. Again, we don't have a short-term rental license process. We don't have an STR case number. So figuring out who did what to get these cases approved was a little bit of a chore. But we've determined that there were 25 residential units that have been converted to hotels as a single unit through the current change in use conversion process since 2017. We now have 7 pending. I just met with an applicant yesterday of one of those pending cases, and they're all watching this very closely. And the ordinances were updated to clarify the status of these prior conversions to protect them as a non-conforming use, meaning they would be expected to continue to allow to be operational even though they were permitted under a prior system, and we would still expect them to get an STR license, but if they didn't meet all of the regulations, that could be adjusted by staff in looking at their license application. Potential conversions to STRs in the ordinances. You had good questions about how many sites are out there that could do this. And our ACE mapping staff and Ms. Deista here actually did the hard work on this. In the inland area, STRs and home shares could be located on a total of 953 sites. In the coastal STR and home share license area, again, that's the purple area in the coastal zone, that comes to a total of 596 sites. And in the coastal area, home shares only, which is mostly the Mesa, that would be 1,738 sites. And again, that would be only home shares. I know, I'm looking at Councilmember Snedden's eyes get wide. Remember, there's a lot of other regulations in this ordinance that may not make these viable. I mean, we're trying to do it, but we're also having a lot of regulations, and some owners may not choose to do the process through the rigorous application process, although we've tried to make it as simple as process. I know, it's vitriolic in many regards. The permit process for the STRs and home shares, I've had to boil this down to, 12th grade English for it to try to be understood. Basically, if I'm an applicant for an STR, I would come to the finance department first. I would take an application to pay transient occupancy tax, register that with finance department. At that same time, I would pay and secure a business tax certificate, which has a very low-cost entry. It's under a couple $100. I would take that and then develop my application, which would include a site plan, a floor plan, because we want to know how many bedrooms are going to be in a home share or the STR, photos, anything we can do to explain the physical environment of the proposed STR or home share. And I'd file that all online through community development and do an intake fee at that time. At that point, staff would review it, consult with other departments as needed, like building and safety, finance, conduct the site and building inspections. So it's important for this program to have boots on the ground by building inspectors to go out and make sure that the map and the site plan and the floor plan that they've given up is actually on the ground. And then we move on to the next step, which is we would accept the application and begin the mailings to notification of neighbors as called out in the ordinance. The final TOT registration would be required after the license review and after staff informs the applicant that is on its way to approval. Then the applicant goes and actually gets the TOT registration, so they're on the hook to pay it. And then before final approval of the zoning clearance, all of that would be completed before the license is issued. Then the license is issued. Again, it's all an online system using our existing software, and it would be issued for 1 year. The renewal applications would be required 30 days before that license expires. It would be a rolling period. We aren't going to have it open like only in January and then everybody else renews in December. It would be throughout the year to be convenient for the applicants and spread the workload through staff. A couple highlights in what I just described, because unless you've done this yourself, you may not appreciate all the steps. There's no public discretionary hearing. That's a pretty significant intent to make this viable, efficient, and as least cost to the staff as possible, although there's going to be some startup costs while we get used to the whole system, and the public does. It would be an automated application review, again, by the city with the existing permitting software. There would be multiple points for coordination between community development and the finance department, which is integral, to ensure that all past taxes, fees, bills are paid prior to the STR license is being issued. And the site would be flagged if more than 3 violations are received about the operation. So bad actors would not be allowed to renew. Other changes in the ordinance that we made per your April 21st direction was we matched the amplified music requirements in the ordinance to what the noise ordinance requires. We amended multiple places to include the owner as a responsible party. We amended the ordinance to ensure that licenses, again, would not be issued until all past due TOT, Transit Business Improvement District, business tax certificate fees, penalties, and interest, all of it has been paid. And that language was worked out pretty carefully with the finance department. You also asked us about the transit occupancy tax, and we have a lot of data on this slide, so I'll just go through it, but we do have, I know they're here somewhere. We have our finance people, I think Keith DeMartini and Lindsay Moss are in the room, right? Right behind me, waving their hands. So in the coastal zone, there are 65 units currently paying TOT, and in the license area altogether, there are 265 that are paying TOT outside that license area, for a total that are currently paying TOT of 330, about. This may have been a couple months old. Inland, we have 23 units that are paying TOT and may qualify for a license. The 65 sites in the coastal license area could qualify to operate as an STR under the new rules if they meet all the ordinance standards. We're not sure. They haven't had to prove any of that so far. They've just signed up to pay TOT. Another 75 unpermitted STRs are estimated in the coastal and inland areas that are not paying TOT, but those may be eligible for a license depending on meeting the ordinance standards as well. So I just want to footnote this. You're asking us for information and data, and we have some of it, but there are a lot of people operating out there without either paying TOT and certainly no license, because we don't have a license to give them. So this is our best estimate, and again, we have the finance department to respond if you have more questions about that. The transit occupancy tax, again, thanks to the finance department for pulling this together. In 2024, the city collected $2.8 million. In 2025, $4.4 million. And as of the end of January, we were at $2.7 million, probably on chart to exceed 25. This includes, by the way, the activity from the city attorney's office in going out to getting the non-compliant owners to pay TOT. And looking at the future with the ordinance in mind and the restricted location and the restricted areas for unhosted STRs, which are the highest taxpayer, they're estimating a resulting TOT loss in a $2 to $2.4 million annual loss. Staff also worked with the finance department, but internally with the city business manager for the community development department, and we came up with the total number of hours required for this intake process. As much as it's automated, it doesn't mean someone on the other end of the application isn't looking at it and checking it for consistency against the ordinance. So staff time doing that, staff time doing the mailing notices, the inspections, et cetera, that would be a total of $3,334 per STR application. We confirmed with the Coastal Commission that there's no separate coastal permit that we have to issue, so there's no separate fee for coastal permitting. And it would be $28.97 per renewal, again, to check on the violations, to check that they're still doing the right thing, to check that their floor plan is still matching. So those are the ranges of fees for these land uses. There was also built into the ordinance a $306 late fee if the renewal is not received before 30 days prior to their license expiration. As I said, this includes staff time for the review, the pre-inspection, administrative costs, mailings, notices, everything. This brings us to our standard paragraph of the California Environmental Quality Act. As many other agencies have done, they have adopted such ordinances under the general rule exemption of section 15061B3 of the California Environmental Quality Act. That's based on the fact that there is no possibility that the proposed SDR ordinances may have a significant effect on the environment. In closing with the general plan and LCP consistency, this has stayed the same for you, that the ordinances have been found consistent with the housing element, the land use element, the coastal land use plan, the historic resources element, the circulation element, the economy and fiscal health element. So our next steps is your committee could choose to continue it for further deliberation at this stage, or you could continue it to City Council for introduction and adoption. We're hoping that we get there by no later than September 2026. Before then, we'll start some education outreach to existing operators before those final hearings. We've already had, actually, probably a half dozen calls from existing operators with good questions, and I've had multiple meetings. I think everybody on staff has. Then we would, after the City Council action, we would take all that information in a big dossier and take it to the Coastal Commission for an LCP amendment. and that is envisioned for fall of '26, with anticipated Coastal Commission review early 2027. We know that Coastal Commission has some concerns about it, so we're hoping for 2027, and we'll just have to see how it goes once we're there. So again, the recommendation for your committee is to review and forward to City Council ordinance amendments to Title 30, the Inland Zoning Ordinance, and Title 28, the Coastal Zoning Ordinance, related to short-term rentals, or STRs, and home shares. To recommend amending the local coastal program to amend Title 28, related to short-term rentals and home shares, per SB Municipal Code, Chapter 28.92. To determine that the short-term rental ordinances are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, pursuant to CEQA Guidelines Section 15061B3. And finally, to determine that the short-term rental ordinances are consistent with the general plan and local coastal plan. That concludes our presentation. Here's information for where you can find all kinds of stuff, and staff's available for questions.
Thank you very, very much. I'd like to open the floor for questions from my council colleagues. Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon.
Thank you. I think our screens aren't showing, but we're friendly. So just a couple questions. But first I want to say it's really, really helpful coming back with the data, so much data, and it really actually has changed my mind on some of the recommendations and thoughts on there. So very, very helpful to have the data and the maps. I just have three quick questions. One of them I'm not sure I understood. On slide 13, you had the picture of the car in the driveway.
I don't know. Do you want me to get back to it?
Sure.
Sorry, as long as I'm scrolling busy.
There you go. Wait, back
This one?
up. This one. So I'm not sure I heard it right, so I just wanted to clarify. Were you saying that if we allowed the tandem or the other changes, that a person could park across the sidewalk there?
No.
Okay.
What we're saying that, I may have mistakenly said that. What this would have to do is actually park on the street. If the garage is not available, yeah. If the garage, for example, has been converted to an ADU, well, that's not correct. If the garage has been converted with a building permit to some other purpose, then they'd have to park on the street.
Okay. So.
No sidewalk crossing, no.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was, that I heard that right or not, because I thought, don't want to allow that with this. Okay. So I have two questions. One, this has come up since the last time we heard this about home share. And two questions. One about how hard it is to enforce that the host is actually present at the time of renting. And then the other question would be about the cost of that enforcement. So, and I think these were really valid questions from the public about if we're allowing home shares, how would we even enforce that, and how much would it cost to enforce that?
We have a very robust enforcement program from the city attorney's office, and that is expected to continue, and a lot of those questions may end up in their office. Probably community development may field a couple of those, and we've been working very well together. So our fees at this time are a best estimate, but we cannot build into the fees a presumed noncompliance.
Okay.
So as much as we have covered the program to launch it for licensing and reviewing them on renewals, honestly, we're hoping that the high bar of the renewal is going to make sure that compliance helps further. And if there are complaints, we just may have to adjust it in the future. It's really hard to know.
Okay, thank you. So it's the presumption of compliance unless there's complaint or some outside information that brings it up, and then the enforcement time for that would be when they were trying to apply for the permit renewal, they would be fined or not get a renewal.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, and it just is kind of hard to tell if a host is actually on premise or not in a home share situation.
Well, the application requires that they have to state that under an affidavit, so that's what we do for building permits. We say that you are going to build this according to the project description on the building permit, so that's kind of our best effort.
Okay. Thank you. So it'd be the affidavit, and then the presumption of compliance, and then if there were complaints from a neighbor or someone who's noticing that's not what's happening. Okay, thank you. And then, just last question, there's the $2 million estimated TOT loss. Would there also be a gain in enforcement fees collected for those that were operating improperly? I mean, just as an offset, it's not a revenue, but an offset for that.
And I'm going to, yeah, either our finance or our city attorney can take that one.
Because in the staff report, there's like sort of a delineation of how much comes in due to enforcement fees.
Yes, Councilmember said, and I'll start, and then maybe the city attorney can add on. I think the operating assumption is that there will continue to be ongoing enforcement revenue, as it will take time for the city and the short-term rental operators to get into compliance with the new ordinances. But over time, as that compliance is achieved, the enforcement revenue will decline. And so there's an assumption there in the implementation.
Okay, thank you. So even if there was an offset, it would be towards the beginning, but the TOT is ongoing.
The TOT is ongoing and the business tax certificate
Okay.
revenue.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We can stay right there.
Oh,
That's one of my questions. I'll just go out of order. So the next one. So both of these slides have me concerned with the reference to a building permit. And I just want to make sure that on both of them, we are treating an originally built house, never modified, never needed a building permit since it was originally built, does not need a building permit to be eligible for on-site tandem and backing out or backing out period. Would that be the way we're setting this up?
yeah, correct.
Okay, and then this one in particular, so what you said before, I think was more accurate. The driveway is too short. A normal car could not fit on that driveway legally and park there because it would be blocking the sidewalk, right? So this example would be somebody in my world who would be already legal, non-conforming, and would not need to comply with some building permit that said other than the original construction, which God knows what we have for a house that old. But this would be an example of a situation where they would legally, meeting all the other requirements, legally have a pathway to short-term vacation rental and be allowed to park it on the street.
Yes.
Okay. I don't really read the ordinance page that way because it sneaks in with the open-ended language of all the other regulations and requirements found in single-family ordinances, blah, 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 blah. And so I specifically want to make sure that we're talking about in both these situations that if you built something, if you had added on that garage 10 years ago and got a permit, then clearly we would treat you that positively. If it was built that way originally, whether you had a permit or not, but in the 1920s, however you got that property built and we have records or don't have records of it, this would be a legal non-conforming situation and I think this example would be the equivalent to the example on the prior page. They would both be treated the same.
Correct,
Does that
yeah.
make sense?
I mean, this would have been conforming probably in 1942. You have a one-car garage and a little cottage, it's adorable, and so that's conforming at that time. The key is we need to have the evidence in our records that it's got a building permit.
Okay. I have some pages to page through, so.
Are you in the ordinance?
Actually, that would have been my first one. So we talked about this last time on the permit process, starting with apply to pay transient occupancy tax, and you have graciously moved the big fee part down to the end. So essentially, after you've gotten approval, that then you actually owe us the money rather than you owe us all the money. Why would that not be true also for a business tax certificate? So why would I have to front the $100 or $150 even to let you tell me that I don't qualify, and then I have a business license for nothing. Why couldn't we load that on the collection of the big amount too at the end of that process?
Committee Member Jordan, we haven't fully worked out the details of when all those fees are going to apply specifically. We know what all the fees are, but what the timing of them, we're still working it out with finance and building and safety and the inspections and the mailing list. There's a lot of logistical details of those details.
Okay, so if you take a note, I think I totally support, the fee at the intake, because I think if we're going to do the work, you should collect the money, that kind of thing. And the rest of that order makes sense to me.
So just through the chair, your inclination is to actually defer just the business tax certificate payment?
Yep,
Okay,
yeah, or else you're buying nothing.
okay.
So, and then on the next page, so you accept the applications and you begin notification mailings. So if there's no discretionary, there's no hearing. This all takes place behind the Wizard of Oz's curtain, right? So if that's the process, why are we doing notifications to whatever the radius is if there's nowhere for somebody to raise a concern?
Staff believes, yeah, it's a policy choice, but a lot of other agencies do that, and it's just an effort to actually let the neighborhoods know that this is coming in, because right now, no one's been notified of anything. So it's something we've heard from stakeholders on the residential area as well as other agencies as, not
So-
a difficult thing to do.
So could you accomplish the same intent if upon approval that you notified that same radius or diameter of people that we've made this decision?
Yeah.
You had no role in this decision administratively because we've got this pretty structured process to go through, and we just want to give you a heads up before you actually get because I think there's a requirement that the newly permitted short-term vacation rental do some notifications too, aren't there? They have to post.
They have to post their site,
There's some other
correct.
stuff that takes place, but it's clearly much tighter and closer to the actual property, and the mailings would get it out further in the neighborhood, right?
Right,
Okay.
right.
I just think, who they're going to complain to on those mailings, if there's nowhere else to complain to, that would be the 7 people sitting up
Yes.
there. And it just
Yeah.
seems like we're just chasing our tail that way then, because there's really no process to provide input. But I think if you just move that to the end where you've approved a project, and then you can let people know.
Can I just, that's a really good point, because frankly, that was in the ordinance way long ago when we actually had a potential hearing process. So I'm glad that you're reading it afresh, and there's no problem with us moving it later.
And then I appreciate your estimate on TOT loss, but I'd also like to maybe see if you can get information for that chart when it comes to council on what part of those millions of dollars, certainly in 25 and 26, were part of our recovery as an enforcement mechanism, particularly in, it's like I had to be careful so I'm not using everybody else's language, particularly in properties outside the coastal zone that shouldn't have been operating. And so the presumption would be, well, those aren't really something to consider in the future as a operating revenue generator. And also in the coastal zone, the amount of enforcement that we've received from people who at that time were not signed up to pay TOT and still have not signed up to pay TOT, that kind of thing. Because last I heard we have something like 60-plus cases in Superior Court or something, right? So people contesting that we can go make them play correctly.
Councilmember Jordan, I do believe that was around the approximate
Yeah.
number, yes.
Okay.
And I thought we might have had that now, but I think we're looking at coming back with that. Oh, yeah, actually, we can have Mr. Martini explain it now.
Okay. And then on the license fee, How confident are you that that is actual full recovery? I guess my experience up here is that it never is. 2 or 3 years later, that we didn't anticipate something costing more or something taking more time. And is there a legal reason that we cannot unconservatively or actually overestimate that so that we stay ahead of what would be normal staff cost increases, inflation cost increases, because literally we'll bake this in and we'll never come back and talk to it for another year, no matter what happens. And then somebody will say, well, we just did a whole half a year where we should have been collecting $5,000 instead of $3,300, and then you'll never make up that time going forward because that was last year and now it's this year. So how confident are you that that number you're coming up with is actual full cost recovery?
We're actually pretty confident because there's a lot of effort that went into in terms of full cost recovery for staff time and how much staff time it's going to take. Also, I think the city attorney can talk about how we cannot build in any presumed noncompliance or presumed lack of performance. That's actually a legal matter that I think was raised in one of your public comment letters too. So I'm not sure if our city attorney wants to build on to that.
Okay. I see everybody's lined up to talk to me.
We have lots of finance
I
people.
really
here.
want to jump in on this one, Councilmember. Thank you so much. I'll also add to that saying that the City Council has adopted a cost recovery and revenue policy. That policy indicates that depending on the type of service being provided to the public, what the appropriate level of cost recovery should be. And for this short-term rental program, staff believes and recommends that this should be a fully cost recoverable program. Every year during the budget process, staff recommends updates and changes to all of the fees in the city's master fee schedule, which is posted on the city's website and in red line version. So that's very clear to the public what the fees are currently and what they're being proposed to. We have a very rigorous process leading to opportunity to adjust it. It is fully within the council's authority to adopt a fee that is lower than what staff is recommending as the full cost recovery level, but that is a decision that the city council needs to make, and that would require general fund subsidy to fully fund the program. It's really important that we don't set a fee that is higher than what staff is recommending is the fully cost recoverable level, because then we are a potential violation of Proposition 218, which are moving into the tax realm versus cost recovery, which was not a realm that we want to be in.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. I wanted to answer some of your questions about the estimates on the revenues. So in the committee agenda report, I did bundle the numbers for the TOT specific to short-term rental revenue. I apologize for that. I'll break it out in the next report. But for the fiscal year 24, 25, and even into 2026, about 30 to 40% of our revenues listed here are specific to the enforcement activity. But I have current numbers for you through May. This is as of January. So through May for this year, our trend continues to go up for what we're collecting for TOT revenue, specific to short-term rentals. So through May, just the short-term rental regular monthly TOT remittance is about $3.3 million right now through May. And the enforcement side is about $1.4 million. So this number, as of January, was 2.7, and now we're at 4.7. So pretty substantial increase since then. And that is trending higher than last year, which also means my estimates for how much we would potentially lose also goes up from what was presented in this committee agenda report. I previously stated 2 to 2.4 million. It's probably going to be in a higher range, around 2.7 million, if we use the same assumptions that we've used so far.
Thank you. And I think when you come back to council too, be interesting to know about the trend in the coastal zone outside of the projected license or permit areas and what that trend of growth has been this year and last year. I have a sense that there's been a rush to get in and set up new properties because that's all you have to do is get in. And I appreciate the change on the insurance dynamic. I'm just wondering, since I get accused frequently of arguing both sides of the same argument, that if we were willing to go to that length to both track and administer insurance and be named an additional insured, would a middle ground on that for the city be just making sure that we get updated every year that somebody actually does have insurance? So just a proof of insurance, rather than request that they name the city as additional insured.
Just standard homeowners insurance, you mean?
Yeah, whatever it is, or renter's insurance or whatever it is. They may, God knows what people are using out there for this. And then in the ordinance,
That's a good idea.
give me a moment. There's a section on that where you've crossed out the requirement for the additional insured. I think it's on page 15. Sorry, it's on page 15. But then there's a section right below that still, it doesn't refer exactly to insurance, but it still requires that the operator of a short-term vacation rental must still indemnify and hold harmless the city. So what that says to me is, if you're doing a short-term vacation rental, that you must continue in this pathway because of the blessing or the privilege we give you to operate a short-term vacation rental, unique to any other land use in this city. We must continue to indemnify and hold the city harmless past the application and permit process, so past the land use approval, which would be the normal relationship for a project approval. It would once it clears that and the statute of limitations goes away for somebody to sue you for your decision, this would continue, that relationship would continue indefinitely for the operator of a short-term vacation rental if for some reason the city was named in a lawsuit. So what's the thought there?
Yeah, Councilmember Jordan, the reason it's in there is because if we are the permitting agency, so I could foresee someone trips in a short-term vacation rental, there was a crack, we'd inspected it, and then they sue the city and the homeowner. And
Okay.
in this case, we're asking the homeowner, it's your property, we permitted you, and we're allowing it, but we want you to indemnify us.
Okay. I'm also concerned on I appreciate the true structure of you operate and we give you so many structured complaints that turn into a notice of violation and there's a cap on that and then you're just out. I mean, you don't get renewed or you're out or whatever it is. I am concerned that there's nothing that addresses repetitive or serial complaints just because somebody does, and the amount of time or costs that we take to handle those, just because somebody doesn't like short-term vacation rentals that we have put through this process and have approved. And I know you just explained that that can't be part of the application process because that's a different thing, that's enforcement process. But do you see any way to, and is that just an internal program kind of dynamic to manage if we have that problem? But I could just see somebody launching into a hedge thing like from years ago, just like I hate hedges anywhere they are in the city and all I'm going to do is drive around and lodge complaints against hedges. And same thing for a short-term vacation rental. And I want to know if there's anything that we can do to protect ourselves and the legal short-term vacation rental from just being dragged into that repeatedly and repeatedly.
So I might ask Brenda to explain this, but there's actually important language in there that says it has to be a verified complaint, meaning someone can complain, and if they have 12 beds occupied when their license only says 4, that would be a verified complaint. If it's something where they're hedge is 4 feet instead of 3 feet, that's not verified in terms of the license. So that language has
So
been
we'd be confident
covered.
it would repeatedly not lead to a notice of violation and not play a role.
We hope not.
negatively. Yeah.
Neighbors can be neighbors.
Okay. I just have a few more. Just a few. I think we've hit my parking ones. Yeah, and my question on this slide and the one before goes back to it's all brand new because it's red on page 12, section E in the ordinance, where it references that all's good for tandem parking and backing out, but subject to the same restrictions and requirements applicable to the underlying residential housing type, e.g. single unit, 2-unit, blah, blah, set forth in what is our existing Chapter 28 automobile parking requirements. And I want to make sure that that isn't a catch-all for a problem for places that were built in the 1920s and don't have off-street parking or were built in the 1920s, like that picture, and they don't have legal off-street parking in that picture either because it would be blocking the sidewalk. So I see those both as the same as one slide, but I'm worried that there's something I'm not conversant about in 2890 that would still grab these people in our automobile parking requirements.
Let's,
It's 13 and 14? Oh, on, I have it, on mine it's on page 12, paragraph E. It says tandem parking and backing out.
okay, so just to clarify a little on this slide, what we're trying to say is this unit that has a one-car garage, they're fine. They can go ahead and convert to the short-term rental. They're not going to be asked to provide additional parking spaces. But if they came down to the counter and said, hey, I want to park in the driveway also, I want 2 spaces.
Right.
We would look at that driveway and say, it's not safe to park in that driveway because you'd be overhanging onto the sidewalk.
It's
So-
not that it's not safe, it's not legal.
And that too.
Yeah. Let's elevate that.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just trying to say, yes, you can keep your parking, whatever it might be, 1 space, 2 spaces,
Okay.
0 spaces. But if you come in and you want to add extra parking, we're going to double check that extra parking to make sure that it's legal.
Okay. And then, Teva, tell me about the part in this on civil administrative penalties, the series of fines. What's the actual slog process to put somebody through collecting a fine? Do we get to handle that in-house alone, shut them down if they don't pay, or is that something that's hidden behind the printers? We take them to Superior Court to collect the fine?
Councilmember Jordan, we would use it as a code enforcement tool. We would collect it in-house.
Okay. And if they didn't pay it,
Then we could take,
we would have to go to Superior Court? Okay, so
but
we,
at the same time, if they didn't pay it, then we would eventually, they wouldn't have a permit anymore.
okay. And if they continued on, we'd potentially take them back to Superior Court if they didn't shut it down too, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so, okay. And then I'm just going to toss in a couple questions then too on language. So you changed some language before in a couple locations where it said must or should, and you changed it to will for things. And on that same page, so 2891, 1870 in A, the listing restrictions, says the hosting platforms must not list. And that's that must word I don't like in there again. Does that look like an opportunity to change that to cannot list? I mean, is that, because that's what we're really saying, isn't
It
it?
could be a shall not.
Or shall
or a
not?
cannot.
Whatever, I mean, more than, I mean, something a little more serious than must, I think. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, we can make that
Okay.
change.
And then next one down also, that hosting platforms must collect. Could that be like are required to collect? I mean, I don't know. I'm just wordsmithing here and just want to make this as tight as possible. So if you could look at both of those and just change or not change depending upon what you think. And I think that's all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. I have an anecdotal story I want to share that'll give context to the questions I'm going to add. So about 10 years ago, back in my previous life of being a filmmaker, I was able to have a few films accepted into the San Diego Comic-Con Film Festival. And in doing so, it's very difficult to find where to stay during that festival in San Diego. My friend and I were looking for places to stay, and most of the hotels were booked up, so we turned to Airbnb. And I was looking at these available places to stay, and I was being denied. But then my friend, whose last name is Schneider, he got it immediately approved. So then the owner of the establishment asked to meet with us. We met him and his wife at a restaurant. And in seeing us, he then told my friend that he would have to double the price. We were in a situation where it was either we comply or we have to sleep in his car. So we complied. So I tell you that story because I'm not the only one that had an experience like that dealing with short-term vacation rentals. So when I met with the representatives of Airbnb specifically, they were very good at providing all this data that supported their business. But when I asked them, can you give me the data of how often your host deny people of color, apparently they don't have that data. So I'm asking, what safeguards can we imply to make sure that this isn't a discriminatory business practice? And what liability does the city potentially have if we do allow it and we are notified that it is a discriminatory business practice?
I'm going to defer that to the city attorney's office.
If we got complaints in that regard, we would look at the operator, we'd talk to the operator, see what's going on over there, and try and investigate it. Discrimination is not okay.
So it would have to be by complaint
Yeah,
basis?
there's really no way for us to track that kind of information. And
That's fine.
I don't even think
Airbnb said the same thing.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's just a big concern for me because I know that back in the day, people of color were denied hotels. I haven't really heard of that happening in a very long time, but I am hearing it happening when it comes to short-term vacation rentals. So, all right, that was my only question. At this point, unless my colleagues have anything else to ask, I'd like to open it up to public comment. Public comment speakers will be allowed 3 minutes. If you want to donate your time to another speaker, that'll add an additional 2 minutes, making it a total of 5. Ms. Clerk?
Okay, our first speaker is going to be Sean Black, followed by Tom Woodrow.
Hello, thanks for taking the comments. I'm a local Santa Barbara resident. I just want to tell you my experience. I have a fourplex across the street from the train station. I mostly do long-term rentals. I purchase vintage properties, 1920s to 1940s, and I try to restore them back to their original grandeur. That's primarily what I do. I usually use them as long-term rentals. I purchased a property across the street from this train station, and the hostel right there, it's a little loud for long-term residents. They're not as interested, and so I turned it into a short-term rental. I bought it vacant. There was no one in there. I support your short-term rental regulations. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think you guys have done a great job. I had some concerns about the parking, and I think you addressed them. It is just like the picture you guys put up. 3, very short driveways in front of garages. It wouldn't have been compliant. Your guys' new rule makes it compliant. The only thing I would ask you to consider is the one unit per lot rule. My building has 4 units. Most of the time it's rented out for bachelor parties and weddings, and the whole unit is rented out. But when it's not rented out for bachelor parties and weddings, I rent out the individual units separately. Because most of the time it's rented out as a single unit, I can afford to operate the 4 individual units very efficiently, and I can offer coastal access at a very low rate, right? Because most of the time it's being rented out as an entire unit. The other times, I wouldn't, under your proposal, I wouldn't be able to rent them out individually. Those rooms individually sometimes go as low as $130 or $140 a night, much cheaper than hotel rooms, and provide coastal access to, it's usually small families who want to come and access the beach but can't afford a giant hotel room. Also, my lawyer explained to me that what you want to do is condoize your building. You want to split it up into 4, and then you get around the process of only 1 per lot. You got to go through this in order to split it up. I'm just saying that, in my opinion, your regulations make a lot of sense. I have buildings downtown and on the Mesa that are due long-term. I'm not interested in converting to short-term. I have this 1 unit. It's 4 units in one. Part of the time it's rented out as the whole building. Part of the time the individual 4 units are rented out individually. When they're rented out individually, it allows me to offer it much cheaper because of the efficiencies of having them all in one place for insurance, cleaning, all those kind of things. A hard limit on 5 units per owner or 6 units per owner would still limit the number of short-term rentals. But by limiting it per lot, it makes it much harder for me to offer it at an affordable rate for the Coastal Commission's desire to offer coastal housing. The rest of it was really great. Thank you, guys.
Next speaker is Tom Woodrow, followed by Dustin Hoyseth.
Council members, my name is Tom Woodrow. I represent the Santa Barbara County Taxpayers Association. We've been representing taxpayers since 1956. First of all, Councilmember Gutierrez, I'm sorry you had to go through that experience. It sounds terrible. Councilmember Jordan, I want to say your thoughts are about enforcement and the complications when it comes to regulating this, I think are incisive and good questions to ask. And Councilmember Snedden, I think you're right to be concerned with cost recovery in the context of the overall cost of what this program would entail. So first, I just want to say to you that I ask you to slow down, be transparent before you lock in a policy that risks harming residents on both compliance and fiscal grounds. First, the ordinance does not satisfy the Coastal Act. Coastal staff has provided feedback. You've all heard concerns raised over the past couple of months, including by the chair of the Planning Commission. So I have to ask you, why not address the problems now when you already know Coastal Commission staff will send it back? Moving forward today isn't a fix, it's a false promise to constituents. It also puts your own staff in a difficult position by carrying forward on an ordinance that already seems to be deficient. Second, there's a lack of fiscal responsibility in how decisions like this get handled. If the city is dipping into reserves to the tune of $25 million below target, potentially sacrificing millions in transient occupancy tax dollars to cover the gaps is not sound governance. Reserves are for emergencies, not for patching avoidable problems created today. And if you risk TOT revenue, you increase the odds of service cuts or deeper reserve use later. So residents pay twice, once through lost revenue and again through reduced services. So council members, I'm asking that you do the accountable thing. Send this ordinance back to the Planning Commission. Address the Coastal Act concerns, and then require a real fiscal impact review, including projected revenue loss, enforcement costs, and specific impact on transient occupancy tax dollars. Route the final decision through your budget committee so the public can see the trade-offs in black and white before you vote. Don't pass something today that you already know you'll be redoing in 6 months. Fix it the right way and then bring it back. Thank you all so much.
I'm going to ask to refrain from clapping and booing and spitting and all that stuff. Thanks.
Dustin Hoyseth, followed by Theo Cracky.
Hello, Chair Gutierrez and council members. My name is Dustin Hoyseth with the Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber. I'm going to try and keep it brief since I've spoken on this a few times. going to start by saying I want to be clear that the chamber does not oppose regulating short-term rentals, but we do oppose this ordinance as written. And we've previously shared our concerns that this ordinance will not meet the city's stated housing goals, as there's no guarantee that the short-term rentals will become attainable housing. We share some of the other concerns that have been mentioned today, but I really want to spend my time on our main concern, which is the economic impacts and fiscal impacts to the city. So this ordinance, and I think one thing I want to mention too is that I think everybody in this room wishes that there was a little bit more, that we had more accurate numbers about all these things that we're talking about. So some of what I'm going to talk about is back of the napkin math, but in previous presentation, this ordinance was estimated to cause a loss of 940 short-term rentals from the existing stock within the city. And I would just want to point out that we can't expect that those short-term rental visitors will shift to become hotel visitors. And this has been come up in a lot of conversations that I've had with hotels. And so to get into the back of the napkin math I mentioned, if we take those that loss of 940 units and conservatively assume they have 50% occupancy throughout the year, that amounts to about 171,550 annual stays per year. And if we conservatively assume a daily average of spending about $500, so that within the local economy, and that's from all of the guests, so I'm not assuming per guest, that's just from one short-term rental stay, that comes to a number of $85,775,000 of potential lost visitor spending in the economy every year. And so, again, that's back of the napkin math, but due to these concerns, I feel like there's an additional economic impact portion of this discussion that I haven't really heard discussed so far, and potential sales tax implications for that. And so, I don't want to direct the council on what they should or shouldn't do. I mean, my perspective would be, I'm glad I've seen finance staff has been looking at this pretty closely, but if there was a way to refer this to finance committee for further discussions on some of these potential sales tax revenue losses that could come of this, or just looking at another ordinance that is not so impactful on the existing short-term rental stock, but still looks to regulate short-term rentals. Thank you for your time.
Theo Cracky, followed by Tiffany Holler.
Good morning, actually afternoon. During the April 21st Ordinance Committee hearing, Councilman Jordan said, "I agree with Sneddon that this is not about finance." I think that any city council member who does not recognize the importance of $2.7 million per year in transient occupancy taxes generated by STRs is not doing a balanced job of managing the overall health of our city's finances. We've already seen cuts in its services to balance the 2027 budget. What important services will be cut next when a huge percentage of revenues generated by short-term rentals are gone due to this restrictive ordinance? Next, I'm still so concerned that this ordinance committee has ignored the many of the important concerns brought up by the Planning Commission and also by concerned citizens. The bottom line is that this ordinance does not satisfy the Coastal Act, and I believe that Coastal Commission staff have already informed you of this. Why is the city unwilling to address the concerns everyone has brought up the past couple of months, especially when you already know that the California Coastal Commission staff will likely send it back? Moving this forward today isn't a solution, and it puts your city staff in a tough position, asking them to carry forward an ordinance that they likely know is deficient. I still have time, and I wanted to mention this idea of prohibiting short-term rentals in high fire areas, which is a really good example of the lack of research and data supporting all of these policies. There's not data supporting its effect on housing. There's not data supporting many other things, but this high fire area, show me the data that proves that short-term rental guests cause more fires than long-term tenants or property owners. I mean, this idea that somehow more fires are going to happen because of short-term rental guests, which, by the way, most short-term rentals have 50% occupancy, which means there's no one there for half the year. The idea that this is going to cause more fires is unsupported as far as I'm concerned. And the fact you have no data supporting this additional restriction is a good example of how deficient this ordinance is. So please, 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 send this deficient ordinance back to the Planning Commission, who had some great ideas and really good ways to make it not deficient. Address those concerns and then move it forward. Don't pass something today that will have to be redone again in the future. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tiffany Haller, and she is having time donated by Kelly Ari. Kelly Ari is in the room. You'll have a total of 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Ordinance Committee. Hopefully I won't need all 5 minutes, but I'm really not here to change your mind about how you feel about short-term rentals. But I do want to go on public record and just talk about how poor policies and politics can play into this. And let the voters know that, the public, when you're not paying attention, these things can get passed. I wanted to stop, though, and address what Councilmember Gutierrez brought up. That was 10 years ago. I'm here to tell you, my maiden name is Fernandez, so I'm sensitive to that as well. And 10 years ago, that might have flown, but now, absolutely not. If you're on that platform in 1 second, you even hint that there's any sort of discrimination, that property's delisted immediately. So I just want to let you know that might have happened 10 years ago, but that won't fly, especially with AI right now. I wanted to address what Ms. Bridley had brought up in allowing an industry of its own in the inland area, like trying to prevent one. We already have that. There's actually someone in town that's a very smart businessman that is actually taking churches and all sorts of things and converting these into hotels that are unhosted. So there's already that. But I also wanted to address before, the first speaker was talking about, well, actually, let me go back and get back on track here. I wanted to also talk about, the Coastal Commission didn't conclude that short-term rentals in the coastal zone were residential uses only when it was convenient. So what's happening right now is that we're taking commercial requirements and shoving them into a residential use, and I don't understand. That's still a ban. What I also want to talk about is, have we estimated how many legally operated R4 zoned properties in the coastal zone will be eliminated? I'm talking about ones that have been operating for 20 or 30 years paying TOT. Have we estimated that? Because this new ordinance eliminates 2/3 of those properties. When you say 1 unit in a building is only allowed to be rented, what happens to the one that's upstairs or downstairs? Because even as the first speaker brought up, 1 unit, if he's renting 1 unit, he has to remove all of the kitchens in the other units, because residential code states that only 1 unit can have 1 kitchen, okay? There's a lot of details in this ordinance that have not been worked out. So shutting down 2/3 of the coastal zone, Coastal Commission even appealable zone properties is really problematic. I also want to address that we come here each meeting and we talk about the nuisances on the mesa. We talk about these people that are upset. I've done my research, and I've found out that less than 1% of all nuisance complaints for our city are attributed to short-term rentals and hotels, okay? So let's talk about that. But if you guys are having a policy of having these being enforced in homestays and all of that kind of stuff, we're not even dealing with the nuisance that people in this audience are complaining about. They're not even going after the ones that the city knows about. So do we have confidence knowing that if there's an issue in the city with home shares, that they're gonna go after those? I hear these speakers every week talk about this, but I'm just concerned that if we can't even deal with this, how are we doing homestays? But really, I just wanna get on public record because we also need to consider these random inspections. So if you're going to require to have these random inspections or an inspection to have the property, I just don't want this to interfere with people's Fourth Amendment right. Citizens with government intrusion, any ordinance that expands government access to private residents should be carefully scrutinized. So honestly, we really need to rethink this and take more time because there's a lot of things that have not been addressed in this ordinance that we really need to, before it goes to Coastal Commission, get worked out. Thank you.
Tony Shabata, followed by Georgia Strickland.
You only have to look out the window to see what's happening right now. The 101 freeway is about to open, and that's going to bring a flood of people into the city. You have to plan on that. It's going to be great for businesses. State Street needs it, but these people are going to need lodging. And if you shut down the STRs, which you're presently doing, especially with the home share is not going to work. You brought it up before. What if that home share person is a registered sex offender? You're putting that person in with that family. You're asking for a lot of trouble. So that's a problem right there. So January 9th, 2018, seared into Santa Barbara County's mind forever. We lost 23 people. 400 homes were destroyed. That is an incredible loss that nobody saw coming. We are in an earthquake zone, we're in a fire zone, we're in a flood zone. We have the risk of losing a lot of homes in the near future. Families are displaced, children who go to school, jobs that are here in the city, child care, elderly home care, patients who go to Sampson Clinic will all be have problems if their homes are lost. Insurance companies are going to pay for that temporary housing that they're going to need to find. Where are they going to go? They're going to go to, hopefully, somewhere here in Santa Barbara so they can keep their jobs, keep their kids in the schools. Goleta is the next option for them. Worst case scenario, they're going to have to go down to Oxnard, Ventura, maybe, and have to commute back and forth. They're going to keep their kids in the same school? I don't think so. They're going to have to find local schools. That elderly parent is going to have to find a new home care person. It's just not a working situation. So if they're, even if they did find someplace to rent, they're going to still have to furnish it. They're going to need furniture for their bedrooms, their kitchens, their living rooms. What I'm proposing, and it should have come up in Planning Commission, but because of this home share, I got a little creative. I'm proposing HERP, Housing Emergency Relocation Program. They're fully furnished homes. I will voluntarily register my home as a short-term rental with the city. If a disaster happens, like we've had, and potentially can have, I will voluntarily cancel all my bookings for as long as the city thinks it's necessary. Insurance is going to pay for it, and the residents can stay in the city. Thank you.
Georgia Strickland, followed by Cliff O'Sullivan.
Good afternoon. I've lived on the Mesa since 1982 and am writing or speaking with a deep sense of urgency and the profound changes short-term rentals have brought to my neighborhood. I respectfully ask the committee to take decisive action, just as many other coastal cities have done, and prohibit STRs in residential zones so our neighbors can remain stable, livable, and truly residential. This is one ordinance I don't want to compromise on, but I realize I may have to. Over the past year, I've spoken before the City Council, Planning Commission, and Ordinance Committee. I would not continue returning if this issue was not affecting my life so directly. I'm asking the council to protect the purpose of our residential zoning, preserve long-term housing, and safeguard the sense of community that makes Santa Barbara unique. Hotels and properly zoned lodging exist for a reason. Visitors should stay in accommodations designed for tourism, not in the middle of neighborhoods where families live, work, and contribute to the city every day. Those who oppose this recommendation are looking out for their pocketbooks, their livelihoods, not the city Santa Barbara budget. Those who support this ordinance are looking out for their homes, families, and community. Thank you for your time and thoughtful consideration. I want to extend my sincere appreciation to Ms. Bridley for her consistent responsiveness and dedication to addressing our concerns. Thanks so much.
Cliff O'Sullivan, followed by Craig Griffith.
Good afternoon. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. I've been a property owner in Santa Barbara for 26 years and have been an operator in the short-term rental business most of that time. I'm in the coastal zone. I have a business tax certificate. I pay my transient occupancy tax dutifully every month. I bought my house many years ago in order to be able to have a place in Santa Barbara at that time in my life. I did it so that I could rent it part-time and use it part-time, and that's exactly what we've done all these years. My family uses it, I use it, and we bring in a lot of business to the city, people that frequent the restaurants and other businesses, and the people that rent my house, they don't want to stay in a hotel. They specifically want to stay in a place with a yard and a kitchen. It's very private. I have a hedge all around my property and a gated driveway. People get to feel like they're a part of the community. They're not the people that would go stay in a hotel or that alternative. I don't remember if I mentioned I'm in the coastal zone. And so anyway, I'm totally in favor of continuing to be able to have short-term rentals in Santa Barbara. We're not in danger of being an all short-term rental economy, as I heard one time many years ago. That's just not going to happen. And I think that the home share idea is terrible. I don't think that is going to add a lot of long-term rentals into the market. For me, I would never do that. Somebody that rents my house, they don't want to stay with a property owner on the premises. However, whenever I rent, I drive by sometimes a couple of times a day just to make sure that people are following the rules and treating the neighborhood right, and so I don't have any problems. And I don't have any problems with my neighbors either. So anyway, I'm against home sharing. I'm for short-term rentals. I think to have it regulated property is fantastic. I can't envision a situation where the city would walk away from all that transient occupancy tax money when most of that business go away. I would choose to just take my place off the market altogether. Anyway, thank you.
Craig Griffith, followed by Ellen Stoddard.
Greetings, council people. I'm concerned about the elderly. In the short-term rental zone, it's right downtown where the facilities are, the libraries, the hospitals, the government offices, where they have lived for decades. They know the people around them. They say hi to people on the street, and they mean it. With taking more, almost 1,000 homes off the market, you're going to be pushing people further and further and further away from downtown where they need to be. What is this? It relaxes the community bonds. Suddenly, we're becoming isolated. And as you probably well know, one of the chief health problems with seniors today is isolation, mental and physical health. Also, second part, big show tonight, right? Tonight, the Santa Barbara Tenants Union is giving their proposal for the rent stabilization ordinance. And in their proposal, there is a great deal that is dealing with short-term rentals, specifically protections for the tenants, not being able to evict someone so you can turn your house into a short-term rental, not being able to flip it, stay off off the market for a year and then go. So tonight, it's a big one. It's going to have a lot to do with short-term rentals. And I'll see you there, guys. Thank you.
Ellen Stoddard, followed by Gail Ward.
Hi there. I've lived on the Mesa for almost 50 years, and I am here because, very simply, I support this ordinance. I support residential neighborhoods being kept residential, not hotels. And I just want to thank you for this ordinance. My only wish is that it was stronger, that we could eliminate some of the ones that were already happening, but that's wishful thinking. One question I have is I wonder how many of these folks who are here speaking in support of short-term rentals live next door to one. It's not the neighborhood we thought we were supposed to be living in. Thank you.
Gail Ward, followed by Patricia Stark.
Thank you. I want to thank Laura Bridley and all the work she and her staff have done. I am in agreement with the proposed state changes. I want to keep our neighbors, our neighborhood, our sense of community. I've lived on the Mesa for 50 years, and the scare tactics presented here are like, there's like, what if this happens? What if that's happened? The sky is falling. So, we can't live like that. There are 2 home shares on my little cul-de-sac, and those people are following the rules. Now, I don't have a home share. They're following the rules. They're keeping things quiet. It's not a problem. And I realize it isn't the moneymaker, but the people who have them, one is a young new homeowner who needs it to help with their mortgage. The other are 2 retired teachers who need to supplement their income because life is expensive. And I do have a Stir next door, and this weekend they installed a jacuzzi and a sauna outside, which, oh boy, I can't wait to the noise that I'm going to have in the future. So does this mean that because they are a legal stir in the neighborhood, that they get to stay there because they've gone through everything, even though they're moving forward, they can still stay there? Is that right? No. Okay, well then what happens if you want to, how did they get shut down?
So, ma'am, you're allowed to voice your comment, but not ask questions and get direct answers. You can ask your questions and they can follow up later, but yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much for your time.
Patricia Stark, and Bill Stark is giving Patricia Stark minutes. Is Bill Stark in the room? Thank you. You'll have a total of 5 minutes.
Thank you. This debate has always had, to me, a David versus Goliath feel to it, and I guess today is going to be no exception. A well-organized and well-funded group of owners, property managers, and investors is squared off against neighbors pleading with you for the preservation of our peace, our safety, and our sense of community. Our neighbors have made good points, and I don't feel the need to repeat them for you today because I feel we have been heard by you. I think the ordinance before you today reflects that. I also want to thank Laura and all the city staff who have worked so hard making the changes and the compromises, again, that are before you today. I do want to circle back to only one point, and that's the fiction that's been propagated by the opponents of this ordinance, that they provide lodging options for low and moderate income families. Well, maybe some, but with the houses in my neighborhood costing thousands of dollars a night, the only way low and moderate folks can afford to stay there is if they pack the people into the houses and in the outdoor spaces and their cars on the street. And this drives up the generation of all the nuisance complaints that you've heard so much about. I really hope this message percolates up to the Coastal Commission. I do support the ordinance as it is before you. I think it represents some reasonable compromises in the areas of parking, insurance, requirements, and the creation of a clearer path to obtaining an STR license. I'm not crazy about the parking, but hey, it's a compromise. As for the other changes, I wholeheartedly support your ban on rentals in the high fire areas. I support the 2-night stays. I support the elevation of violations, disruption violations. I would hope it would be both at the application, the renewal, and in the middle. Whenever 3 violations occur, that's it for them. I urge you to keep the limit on the 1 license per owner. I agree that this will go a long way to stop the commercialization of the Mesa and our neighborhoods from becoming outsized income streams for investors. Finally, I'm sure you're aware that this issue has now reached the level of our state government. A bill now before the state Senate, SB 1318, would prohibit the Coastal Commission from stepping in and stopping local governments such as us, such as you, who want to limit or ban vacation rentals, if they do so to address significant housing shortages. Now I would like to read from a Barton Real Estate newsletter I received this month, and I'm quoting directly. The Mesa in particular is experiencing intense demand with very little inventory to meet it. The segment that represents Santa Barbara's typical median price point is essentially non-existent right now. For context, that means a qualified buyer today has almost nothing to choose from. And finally, my sweet husband gave me his time, and so I'm going to repeat the point that he's made repeatedly to you. These commercial businesses do not belong in our residential neighborhoods. Thank you very much.
Lori Rafferty, followed by Louise Asbury.
Hello, folks, today, again. And 14 years and counting. How many years are we going to kick this can down the road to get this finished? And I really feel you all asked good questions, and you provided good impact, and the staff, I commend them for all the work they've done on this. So I think it's time to get going. Real quick here, I'm going to have 2 comments. I want to tell you something about additionally insured. If you own a boat in the harbor, and you are slip permittee, recently the harbor passed and all boat owners have to list the waterfront harbor on as an additionally insured. And they're not even running a business. So I don't know why you wouldn't do that here. That's just me from a legal standpoint. Second, I am not worried about any tax revenue. You live here long enough, 50 plus years, you see the fickleness of the hospitality industry go up and down, viruses, toxic train spills, landslides, you name it. I'd be more worried about what's going on with rent control costs. So basically my last focus here is I support the new designations and that you officially recognized it. Thank you. The state has done it, the county has done it, the fire marshal has done it, the city has done it, that there are 4 high fire hazard areas in our city, and to not allow any short-term rentals or home shares in them, I think it's just really the legally correct thing to do. I don't think the Coastal Commission would have a hard time with it at all. They're designated for a reason. None of us created it. Do we like it? No, but it's life, and it's a litigious world. And so you got to look at the big picture here. It's just not always about people's profits, about what is right for our community going forward. And honestly, I think that's really it. I'm a taxpayer. I'm not worried about the loss of revenue. There's a lot of other ways. And I did read something that 14% of the revenue, TOT revenue, is only short-term rentals. I don't know. Bring that back up. Okay, thanks for all your hard work. 14 years, you guys. Let's get it done.
Louise Asbury, followed by Ibrahim Brunner.
Good afternoon. I'm standing here because I'm just genuinely confused. I remember many months ago this all started because of Housing Element number 19, which directed the city to create a short-term rental ordinance for one reason, to preserve long-term housing. I've been up here a few times and we've talked about the economic impact, the impact to homeowners, but I just want to make sure you're aware this will not add one unit of long-term housing. Our homeowners, I'm the general manager of Paradise Retreats, and they have owned these homes for many, many years. They're not investors. They simply rent out their home when they're not using it. They put in massive blocks for the holidays, for summer, for whenever they want to be here, and they're just supplementing their income so that they can pay their mortgage and pay their bills to keep their homes here. This ordinance seems to have gone down all these rabbit holes of parking restrictions and fire codes, and we've just lost sight of what it was really about. So if this is indeed about housing and adding long-term housing, I encourage you to send this back to the drawing board. Thank you.
Ibrahim Brunner, followed by Robert Hunter.
You got my name wrong. It's Eberhard. I'm from Germany. And anyway, so dear council members, I appreciate all of you always answering my letters, especially you, Mr. Gutierrez, and also you, Mr. Jordan. So I grew up in Germany in an area with vacation rentals. I live on the Mesa. I've stayed in vacation rentals with my family because of cost and being able to cook. You know, it's just easier sometimes with that. Can't do it in a hotel. We have an ADU. We moved here 8 years ago, and we rented out to the Housing Authority of Santa Barbara through Section 8. And I am totally in favor of this ordinance and limiting short-term rentals. Second, homeowners have no business of doing, in my opinion, of having vacation rentals. If you don't live here, you can't rent out a place. Then don't have a place here, you know. I'd like to see the financial situation for homeowners to favor long-term rentals versus STRs. So again, Housing Authority of Santa Barbara, limit the STRs, the short-term rentals to maximum 60 days per year, so it favors longer-term rentals. A 7-day minimum on a non-hotel rental. Anybody shorter than a week should stay in hotels. If it's too expensive, don't come here. I also like to see a website controlled by the city that shows all legally approved rentals. So anything that shows up on Airbnb and anywhere else, I want to be able to check that. And I think a good way to do that too about complaints, I have it in SB Connect. I use that a lot for illegal dumping and shopping carts. And then, you know, anybody that speaks here about the density of the short-term rentals on the Mesa, you know, like I live on the dodgy side of Cliff, not on the other side where this is a real problem. So, but we have friends there, and he showed me recently every friggin' house is a short-term rental. And at some point, we had friends that lived on Donner Lake where they said, you go there and you live alone. I don't want that, okay? I moved here because I think the city is fantastic, and so I want to see more of that. Lastly, I'm in favor of rent control. I lived in Germany, and it works there. So that's it. Thank you.
Robert Hunter, followed by Kathy Janega-Dykes.
Thank you, Council. I want to just give you a little background on myself and what I own. I have multifamily units, long-term. I have short-term 30-day. I have short-term, a short-term apartment complex at 3 of the 6 units are short-term in the hospital zone, in the hotel zone, as well as a single family in the residential zone that's short-term. It's oceanfront. So I believe that everything should be balanced, and it's all about how you balance this, both the finances, bringing more money into the city, as well as dealing with housing. And, you know, my short-term downtown, I stopped doing I stopped doing 30-day downtown on Airbnb and put veterans in there. And so, I'm supporting the veterans, even though they're trashing my units. I have people in my downtown long-term that I've never raised their rents in 8 years. And so I'm a responsible landlord and operator of short-term rentals. The thing that I object to is the 1 unit per lot, and I don't know where that, other than just limiting numbers, it doesn't, that I believe belongs in a zone-specific situation, I think. Because it would basically take my units that are short-term that I've paid, prior and current TOTs on. So I've always paid the city my TOTs, and so that I wouldn't be able to do that. And I also have that same situation where I have a studio that's attached to a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, and that provides a lot of flexibility to people coming into town. So this thing needs a lot more thought as to how the balance works and responsible restrictions. Thank you.
Kathy Janega Dykes, followed by Brian Holland.
Mr. Chair, members of the Ordinance Committee, my name is Kathy Janega Dykes. I'm President and CEO of Visit Santa Barbara. I've previously shared my concerns regarding the proposed changes to the short-term rental ordinance, and I do believe that a more comprehensive analysis should be completed before moving forward with recommendations of this magnitude. And my concern is not about maintaining the status quo. I absolutely believe that residents should not have to deal with operators who fail to follow the rules, and stronger enforcement is warranted. However, before making policy decisions that could have significant economic consequences, we should fully understand the impacts. And there appears to be several assumptions driving these recommendations. These were noted earlier, namely that STR visitors will simply shift to hotels, and that removed STR units will automatically become long-term housing. Neither outcome is guaranteed. STRs often serve families and groups with different lodging needs, and some visitors may choose alternative destinations. I'm also very concerned about the potential loss of transient occupancy tax revenue and the broader impact on local businesses and the city's general fund. So before adopting these changes, it would be prudent to conduct a thorough study to evaluate the potential effects on visitation, tax revenues, housing outcomes, and the local economy. And rather than eliminating inventory based on assumptions, I believe that the city should focus on strengthening regulations, enforcement, platform accountability, and more. This is certainly a very important issue, and I encourage the city to ensure decisions are guided by data and analysis rather than assumptions. Thank you.
Brian Holland, and our final speaker in the room will be Samantha Ireland.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Brian Holland, and I represent the ownership group at 1 Hot Springs Road and the Santa Barbara Cemetery Association. Our property is located at the northeast corner of Cabrillo Boulevard and Channel Drive, directly across from the Post Montecito. I'm here with a very narrow request, which is to add 1 Hot Springs Road to the proposed short-term overlay map. There are 3 reasons this makes sense. First, this is a matter of basic map consistency. The properties across the street on Los Patos Way are included in the overlay. Our property is in the same coastal visitor serving corridor, and we should be treated consistently. Second, we are actively pursuing a 22-unit multifamily housing project on this site. We are not asking to convert housing stock away from the long-term rental use. To the contrary, we are trying to create new housing. But even the limited ability to operate one short-term rental as contemplated by the ordinance helps the economics of the project and supports the feasibility of delivering those units. Third, including this property is consistent with the Coastal Act's emphasis on public coastal access and visitor-serving accommodations. The city's own STR materials recognize that the ordinance is intended to create a clear permit path and operational standards, particularly in appropriate areas such as hotel, commercial, and multi-residential locations. Our site fits within that logic. So my request is simple. Please direct staff to add 1 Hot Springs Road to the overlay map before adoption. It is a modest, site-specific correction that promotes consistency, supports new housing, and preserves coastal visitor access. Thank you.
Samantha Ireland.
Good afternoon, Ordinance Committee. My name is Samantha Ireland. I'm a 35-year resident of Santa Barbara, 20-year realtor, and 20-year vacation rental company owner and manager. And I'm here today to just talk about one specific issue with this ordinance. I know that you have decided on a zone method of deciding where it's appropriate, where it's not. Fine. You've decided that residential zones are not appropriate. Fine. No problem. The areas that you have deemed that are appropriate, you have deemed are appropriate are hotel and commercial zones, namely East Beach, West Beach, a little bit of the downtown corridor. Why are you requiring that you go through the planning department and creating so many hoops that those people that are currently operating there cannot get a permit? You think that by keeping those, you're going to keep those short-term rentals. But I can tell you that if since 2017, only about 25 short-term rentals have been able to get through that process, those that are operating in those areas that you have deemed appropriate for that activity will not be able to get through, and it is essentially banning all new vacation rentals. Is that going to be enough when you go to the Coastal Commission and they have as one of their tenants to provide and protect affordable long-term, or excuse me, affordable overnight accommodations for visitors? One of the speakers here said it's not affordable. If you have a family and you have to rent 3 hotel rooms, are you going to go to Hotel California and rent those for $3,000? 3 of them? Or are you going to rent a modest 3-bedroom, 2-bath home and be able to have your family come here for a wedding, for a vacation? Are we going to turn away all that business? They will not go to hotels. Please redo the process. Why can't it be simple like it is in Goleta or Carpinteria, where it's a matter of applying for a permit? You don't have to jump through all these hoops that you have to have so many parking. You have to park straight out. You can't back out of the parking. You have to do this. You have to do that. Make it simple. You're already reducing the area. Let's make it so those in those areas can continue to do business. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Chair Gutierrez, that was our final speaker in the room. We do have 5 speakers online with their hand raised, so I'm going to start calling on them now. Our first speaker is going to be Fong Bui. Go ahead and unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes. Fong Bui, can you hear us?
Yes. Hi, my name is Fong Bui, speaking on behalf of the California Short-Term Rental Association. We also have a local chapter with nearly 100 individual members. We appreciate that the city is taking steps to create a formal program and structured parameters to allow responsible operators to operate. We support balanced and effective regulations for STRs. However, this ordinance is not ready to move forward. It is overly restrictive and fails to meet the standards set by the Coastal Act on multiple fronts. Night and availability restrictions directly reduce the supply of coastal accommodations, limiting when and how often the public can access affordable lodging near the shore. And the proposed 3K registration fee is actually one of the highest in the country and certainly the highest in California, even when compared to other coastal communities. Owner occupancy and primary residence requirements eliminate entire categories of responsibly operated STRs in the coastal zone, properties that have long served as visitor serving accommodations under the Coastal Act's own definition. And permit caps impose an arbitrary ceiling on supply, further restricting public access to coastal lodging the Act is specifically designed to protect. This isn't a close call, and Coastal Commission staff has already flagged these concerns to city staff. Several planning commissioners have also raised concerns, as well as residents. And moving this forward today doesn't resolve any of those problems. It just delays it. And the Coastal Commission will send this back. Staff, unfortunately, will have to redo the work, and the community will have waited months for nothing. And so the responsible path is clear. Please return this to the Planning Commission, resolve the Coastal Act conflicts, and bring back an ordinance that can actually survive review by the Coastal Commission. Thank you for your time.
Next speaker is going to be Stephen Leonard. Stephen Leonard, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for your time. My name is Steve Leonard. I'm an associate attorney at Angel Law, and we urge the Ordinance Committee to reject the proposed revised ordinances. Broadly, there are 3 reasons for our request. 1, the city still unlawfully circumvents CEQA. 2, the revised ordinances run counter to the coastal access requirements of Santa Barbara's LUP. And 3, they contain unfair and unsupported barriers to entry to the STR market. So first, we ask that the city engage in environmental review under CEQA before taking action on the ordinances. The staff report wants the council to get out of CEQA by using the 15061B3 exemption, an exemption that does not apply here. So to use this exemption, the city must demonstrate certainty that the inland ordinance will not have significant environmental effects, directly, indirectly, or cumulatively. The staff report estimates a revenue loss of $2 to $2.4 million in TOT, and this just shows that the project will substantially alter lodging and travel patterns, likely pushing visitors into STRs in other towns and even into hotels, increasing vehicle miles traveled, and as a direct result, increasing air pollution. We ask the city to be transparent and accountable and engage in the public environmental review process required by state law, disclosing and evaluating the effects of the ordinances for the public and the council to see. This requires, at a minimum, quantifying the now unquantified number of STRs that will be eliminated under the new high fire hazard area definition. Additionally, the revised ordinances still fail to protect public coastal access as mandated by the Coastal Act and by Santa Barbara's own LUP. In the newly revised drafts, the city would impose a minimum of 2 days per stay in hosted and non-hosted STRs, and this would totally price out people who can only afford one-night stays. Putting coastal access out of reach of regular people is inconsistent with Santa Barbara's own public coastal access policies in the LEP, and so we ask the city to drop this meeting. Finally, the revised ordinances raise a few more subtle barriers to entry that we ask the city to consider. We object to the licensing fees currently under consideration. The initial license fee would be $3,334. The renewal fee is $2,897. These fees are totally exorbitant compared to fees in the rest of the country. And you risk licensing only the most deep-pocketed homeowners who can front that loan, while disqualifying the people who might want to rent out a rig but can't afford it up front. And this is contrary both to the city's coastal access goals and to common sense. So we ask the city to reconsider that dollar amount. Another barrier is that despite categorizing STRs as residential use pretty consistently throughout the ordinances, the text treats STRs as transient uses just for the purposes of AB 2097's near transit parking exemption. So we urge the city to treat STRs consistently as residential uses. We also ask the city to allow for appeals of STR and home trade license applications. This would reduce the risk of litigation, and at the same time is cost effective for license applicants and the city, and it advances fairness and transparency and due process for applicants. That's all. Thank you so much for your time.
Our next speaker is Lloyd Beardsmore. Lloyd, please go ahead. Lloyd, can you hear us?
Good morning, good afternoon, I guess, at this point. For me, the real issue here isn't short-term rentals. It's whether the public process means anything. The Planning Commission's recommendations are being ignored. The ordinance took shape less than a year ago and keeps changing, and evidence supporting the restrictions is nowhere to be found. Beyond the process failures, the financial risks are significant. Lost TOT revenue, enforcement costs, and serious litigation exposure that will fall on city taxpayers. Residents should be asking why this is being rushed. Why hasn't it returned to the Planning Commission? And what precedents does this set for future property rights? This is a transparency, governance, and fiscal responsibility problem that affects everyone. Please take the time to do this right, not push through. Thank you.
Our next speaker is identified just with iPhone, does not have a name. iPhone, please go ahead.
Hi, yes, sorry about that. This is Steve Fort. My wife and I own a house at 816 Grove Lane. I'm still here commenting about impacts on neighborhoods and neighbors. Ms. Bridley's done a great job on this ordinance, and I want to commend the folks, mostly from the Mesa. Comments are perfect, and these are the people that are impacted by short-term rentals. And speaking to some of the other comments, Councilperson Jordan is absolutely right. It's not about finances. It's about neighborhoods and quality of life. We've invested in our homes and our neighborhoods, and we cannot afford to and don't want to absorb the impacts of transient uses next door to us. And talk about government intrusion. What about the intrusion of transient occupiers, transient uses into our neighborhoods? It just continues to dumbfound me that people choose to ignore or won't acknowledge these impacts. And they continue to hoover up properties and want to create these short-term rentals, throw out these, in some cases, disingenuous arguments, relying on the Coastal Act to try and change the outcome of this ordinance. I understand the issue with the Coastal Commission, and I understand where it's going to go as well. Hopefully that legislation that was discussed can help address the issue, and it's too bad that the Coastal Commission has been somewhat duped into thinking that these are always low-cost, affordable housing opportunities when, in general, they're not. So I just urge the Ordinance Committee and staff to continue forward with this. There is no compelling reason to allow short-term vacation rentals in residential zones where commercial uses and hotels are not allowed. It's not about finances, it's about the neighborhoods. And the people that create these neighborhoods, that live there and invested in them, don't appreciate people coming into these neighborhoods and trying to turn them into their own commercial endeavor, taking advantage of the neighborhoods that have been created over the years, only to shift the impacts on all the neighbors. And they don't even live there. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of over these arguments, and I continue to not understand how people cannot understand the neighborhood's perspective about the impacts. Sure, there are cases where there are good managers and you rent out to people that don't cause impacts, but that's not across the board. And people can't afford to have someone new coming into their neighborhood every weekend and having to deal with the hot tub that's been put in and the whatever else has been put in and the band that's been hired, etc. And I know I'm being a little over the top there, but the risk is always there. We don't want short-term rentals in our neighborhoods.
Okay, that's time. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dennis Richards. Dennis, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we've been talking about this for several months, and the situation hasn't changed. There's going to be people who are completely against short-term rentals, no matter what the data shows, no matter the loss of revenue. It's just like being against somebody's religion or ethnic background. It's not something that can be practically explained. It's a conceptual problem. And then there's people on the other side that are strong property owner believers. They feel entitled to do what they want with their property if they operate within the nuisance laws. So how do we bridge the gap? This is what the three individuals up there have to do and what the council members have to do. They have to bridge the gap by compromising. I think the ordinance in its form has a lot of great features. It's important to provide the kind of protections and the kind of scrutiny that will keep the neighborhood a neighborhood. So let's do that. Let's make sure that all the clear-cut provisions on noise, on number of individuals based on beds, on reasonable guidance all around that is incorporated. But to limit the zone right now to the east and west beach corridor is very problematic for a lot of reasons. There simply isn't enough hotel rooms in Santa Barbara to accommodate visitor demand. So that just simply means that even if you think that people who are going to want to rent a home for an important anniversary, a birthday, to cook, to be in together, and to enjoy yard, that those people are going to go to hotel rooms. They're not, but even if they were to, there's just not enough rooms to accommodate demand. So right there, you have a problem that's mathematical. This is not emotional. There aren't enough hotel rooms. My suggestion, and I've been conveying this to various people, is to go with the grandfathering option for at least the 65 units identified in the coastal zone that have been paying the tax all along. Grandfather those folks in. They've been paying the tax. They've been registered for a long time. If they're not operating a clean operation, if it's problematic, they'll get shut down under the new rules. And consider broadening certain sections of the areas, whether it's coastal or inland, based on a cap, a reasonable cap per neighborhood. This type of licensing does not run with the land. It would run with the individual. So if the individual were to sell, that would be one less short-term rental. This protects the neighborhood mentality. If the ordinance is passed with grandfathering in place, there won't be any new short-term rentals. There will only be fewer through attrition and time. So obviously this current ordinance has a lot of problems. It has a lot of good things too, but it needs a lot more massaging, a lot more work, a lot more analysis, and it has to be based on mathematical data. $80 million is what's being lost as a result in terms of city revenue. 80 million. Thank you.
And our final speaker will be John Bianchi. John, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, my name is John Bianchi, and over the last 10 years, I have owned one short-term rental. And my comment is just from my perspective of having done this for these number of years, and it's that over the years, I've actually been able to meet a number of the tenants, and what comes across is they all express a gratitude of being able, number one, to be in Santa Barbara. That's what they're most grateful for, and number two, they're grateful for being able to stay at a facility that provides a lower cost alternative for their family. Yeah, I've seen that time and time again, and it's nice to be able to offer somebody a short-term rental, and for those folks to really appreciate the benefits that it brings them. On another note, my short-term rental, it brings benefits to restaurants and a small corner grocery store in our neighborhood. We encourage our guests to use these establishments, and we receive positive feedback from our tenants on these establishments, especially the small corner grocery store. People really like that. I guess the whole bottom line that I'm coming from is that I would ask you to protect the coastal access and to protect affordable visitor accommodations. I'd ask you to adopt a balanced set of regulations that distinguish between good and bad operators. And my last comment is the concept of only allowing one unit out of a multi-unit complex to be available for the vacation rental, the short-term rental. That I believe that just needs to be rethought based on the previous comments by a number of the public who spoke here. Thank you very much.
Chair Gutierrez, that was our final speaker.
Thank you. So now I would like to open it back up to my colleagues to see if they have any comments and or motions to make. Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon.
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez. So I think first, just incredible amount of work on, and especially with the data-driven and bringing forward and the maps and being really responsive to the questions that we had. I'm super appreciative. I do want to address that we have been working on this for years, and it's come to ordinance 3 times now and continued, and with a lot of public comment, and I would hardly say this was rushed process, so I just want to acknowledge that I think we have done a deep dive, we have gone into the data and taken this very seriously, and I think what I'm seeing first, well, I do want to address that short-term rentals are fun. There's no question of that. When I travel, I love to stay in a vacation rental, and one of the big questions is if that particular community is having an availability of housing crisis. So it's very different going someplace where you are helping to fill vacant spots by renting and something out versus taking up spots that could be housing. And I hear that many of these won't be instantly converted into housing. And I believe those who say that they'll just take it off the market. I believe you. But what I'm seeing in the data here is not just the significant impact today with what might not be used, but this potentially thousands of units that if things were easier, if things were lawful, if things were more convenient to convert, could potentially be converted. And I realize it wouldn't be every single one of them, but when we're in a position of having a shortage of 8,000 units, the potential of 2,000 units being vacation rentals is a pretty significant impact. And I'm really glad we asked for that data because it, to me, shows that the future impact is potentially very significant. And in terms of our housing element, I think it's an important issue. And in terms of why we wanted to look at this was to not just create housing, but to preserve housing. So I'm approaching it with that lens. In addition, said it before, residential zones are for residents. This is about so much more than the TOT bottom line, and $2 million is really not a big enough number to be selling out our neighborhoods. So that's just bottom line for me. Homes are for residents, residential zones are for residents. Residents volunteer in the community, they work in the community, send their kids to school in community, support community, our community. And something that a public commenter said, I think said it just right, that visitors get to feel like they're part of the community when they stay in a vacation rental, but it's a borrowed feeling, and it's a commodity that is for sale, basically. And the people who are creating that sense of community are the neighbors, are the residents, are the people who are living in the neighborhood and caring for their properties in that way and giving that sense of neighborhood. So I sort of object to the borrowed feeling of being part of a community, but not being the actually contributing in the community. So I like neighborhoods for neighbors, especially when it comes at the expense of the neighbors. So I want to address a few of the things in the feedback. And I think when we had questions, it was more about sort of looking what that would look like when it came back. So after seeing how the things would look like, I'm just going to I'm just going to go down the list. And if we need to sort of vote on them individually before they go forward, that could be a way to do it before too. But we just simply do not have the inventory to spare for vacation rentals. So yes, thank you I'm just going to go down the checkpoints in the ordinance committee feedback summary. Just overarching, I only want to allow them where we have to, by law, allow them. I do not want to allow them in residential zones. Thank you for including this simplified map. It was really helpful. I would say yes, continue prohibit licenses in the high fire hazard area. This wasn't just about more fires in a high fire hazard area. If you live in a high fire hazard area, you know how difficult it is to evacuate. You know how difficult it is. Sometimes you're told to evacuate going uphill towards fire. And if you live there, you know, like, oh, that's okay, because when I go up, I'm then going to go down. And we've had recent studies, too, that it can take up 2 to 4 hours to evacuate from high fire hazard areas. And one car on those narrow roads that does not know what they're doing can cause a significant delay. And this isn't just anecdotal. I'm just going to read directly from the staff report. The city's fire marshals supported this restriction, noting that limiting STRs or home shares in high fire hazard areas would help with evacuations and could further protect life and safety, including firefighters' lives in serious incidents. And we know in the high fire, it's not just if, it's when. I mean, this is a recurring event. So that one to me is very clear to prohibit in the high fire. The consideration of insurance requirements, after the consideration and going back and forth, I'd like to keep the insurance requirements. I think it's important to be able to handle the liability that this intensified use creates. So I would like to keep that requirement. I think it could be eased in one way or another, as Councilmember Jordan mentioned, with whether it's carried with the policy or you know, however that works. But yes, I think we need to require it. You know, at first with the easing the parking restrictions, I was okay with looking at that, but I think I would like to only allow it where it's already non-conforming. And the reason is because of this intensity of use. So, you know, I liked it back before when it was tied to the number of beds and bedrooms. So, because the reason is the intensity. So if you live someplace and you're a resident, every now and then you might have a party once a year on your birthday, and you're going to have multiple cars that are parked beyond, you know, on the street beyond the number of your bedrooms. If it's a short-term rental, every weekend is that intensity of use, is it extra parking. And it really does wear on a neighborhood and, you know, other people in the neighborhood. So I'm not in favor of easing the restrictions other than if it already has a non-conforming, you know, verified non-conforming use. And I'll just justify that because of the intensity of use. You explain why the number of licensed owners or operators is limited. So I want to confirm, I would like to keep them limited. It was very, I think, convincing argument in there to not, you know, convert the whole place and to incentivize monetizing that. You did provide the data, and with that data, it confirmed for me that there are way too many that could potentially be incentivized to convert. So thank you for that data. It was really important, and I suspect it's an underestimate, but it's enough of a number. And then for the home shares, I was open to home shares. I thought it sounded okay. What I'm hearing back is not a single person wants home shares. The short-term rental people are not supporting it. They're saying home shares are ridiculous, basically. No one want to stay in them. Who would want to do that? I thought it was an okay idea, but I also had members of the public saying that they were really concerned about enforcement of that then you have to like really get inside people's homes business to see are they actually home while they're hosting or not, and there were other concerns. So I'm not attached to the home share anywhere, and it doesn't sound to me like there's been even one single voice of support for it that I've heard. So if I'm wrong about that, or there's more support that I'm not hearing, please let me know. But for some reason, people seem very, very against it, so fine. I'm okay with that. And then the viable permit path, yes, we need the viable permit path. We need it to be clear. We need to be how you set it out. I do like to keep the noticing if we're going to have it in neighborhoods, but I'd prefer that we don't have it in residential zones. So, that's a if and kind of question. Like if it's going to be in residential zones, then I think people need to be notified ahead of time, just to know what's happening, and just neighborhood information, the same way you would inform, if your water main is being replaced or something. Nothing you can do about it, but it's nice to know what's happening in a neighborhood. So I think, the 2 million TOT, yeah, maybe we might lose that, and it's not that it's nothing, but I do think that enforcement might go up too, and I do think there's a much bigger question about the financial burden that comes from not having community living in community where they serve. And I think there's sort of intangible financials and impacts with that make that trade-off more than worth it. And I will share, even though we've heard that not a single one of these would be converted to housing, it's just not the experience. As I've shared before on my block and surrounding block, it used to be bonfires every single weekend up the hill in the extreme high fire with people who would not dampen the flames, even though neighbors were yelling, in real, true alarm. And I don't know who's the host to call. I don't know how to complain about in the moment that somebody's being too loud or not, or sometimes on a hills I can't even tell where the sound is coming from. But to me, it wasn't the sound, it was the fire. But on that block where there were no less than 5 vacation rentals, within a couple months, they are filled by families who walk their kids down the street to school and are serving and living in the community. And there's just no $2 million TOT equivalent for the benefit to the neighborhood. And the other speaker said it well, too, that if you move to a place that has so many short-term rentals, you move there to be alone and you don't have your neighbors. And I can say also anecdotally, but other people report on this too, that when we have an issue in the neighborhood and we have residents who live there now, instead of really weekly, the non-neighbors who are contributing to danger issues, instead, we've had it before where people have called the police and you literally are yelling out the window, somebody call the police, and the neighbor calls the police and the other neighbor calls, because there are neighbors there and we know each other. And especially in the high fire too, having neighborhood safety, communications, fire-wise neighborhoods where you're communicating with people. There's a critical mass of people in a neighborhood that makes it safer, that makes it stronger for community. So those are my comments on those, and after having the feedback summary, that's where I would go on those moving forward.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon. Councilmember Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll get on my soapbox first and then catch up with staff. So we keep coming back to some of the same arguments, and some of them originate with staff's pretty cover sheet on goals. And I think people just aren't hearing that the city needs to dance with more than just the people sitting up here or the people out in the community. They have to take this to the California Coastal Commission. And so they offer a broad menu of goals, many of which I would privately scoff at because it's exactly as Councilmember Sneddon said, residential zones are for residents. That is the most important, not clear enough goal in those series of goals. The number one goal in my pursuit of this has to do with protecting residential zones for residents, nothing else. The others would be great. I'll tell you what I think of them. There's no way in the world I think we're going to gain housing units from this action. I can live with that. If somebody wants to leave a house empty That's their decision today. We're not addressing that. There's no way stuff is migrating to a hotel. These are different customers. I'm a different customer when I go out and use a short-term vacation rental than when I go out and use a hotel. Different situation. I would say, well, the one that's always missing from that menu list is what the sale of properties, as I see them all the time on realtor lists, like this is a great spot for a short-term vacation rental because it's anywhere on the mesa. The sale of those properties is artificially inflated by those transactions because of the potential for return on that investment. And then those properties are used as comps for the rest of the neighborhood the next time somebody tries to purchase a property there. I don't think I have to have more than anecdotal watch of what people walk around and how they offer to sell their houses and what the realtor sheets look like to come up with better data on that. But I would believe for a fact that as short-term vacation rentals have infiltrated single-family neighborhoods, that they have also had a reciprocal negative effect on the housing prices around them, driving up the cost. When people talk about the loss of revenue, I will tell you that I think that is a disingenuous argument that no good policy decision should ever be held hostage by the question of revenues versus protecting what the zoning says right now. That is a horrible argument to stand up and make. We will find a couple $1 million. Maybe we won't find a couple $1 million, but we will have an entire set of neighborhoods that are thankful for having their neighborhood protected. I think today maybe you're not, I couldn't say you're reading the room, but wrong, but I think people with interests in this are reading the community wrong. Let's just say we made this up and we said, hey, we'll put this on the November ballot. I would guarantee you, as much as I could guarantee anything, that a total ban in the city on short-term vacation rentals would pass significantly with little opposition in the city by voters. And so be careful what you wish for, because I think this is a compromise that we're offering today in what, unless, other than we're being held hostage in a third of our city by the coastal zone, in what the city could move towards. Neighborhoods are fed up with this. People have commented on the process speed and the transparency. I think that lady has left the room who said 14 years, which puts me right in my sweet point of Planning Commission and City Council. And I can tell you, 14 years ago, we were talking about it at Planning Commission. And I think the number of meetings that you heard somebody else talk about today is way short. We were talking about this 2 community development directors ago, actually had a council meeting in there where we sent it back to community development to continue to be worked on. Multiple ordinance committee meetings, multiple planning commission meetings, all in public. It's probably 14 years in process. I know that when I was elected for the first time in 2019, this was one of the 5 things on top of my list. And we're still sitting here, getting towards 7 years later, and we're still working on this thing. This has not been something that's speedily been introduced to the community or moving along way too quick with way too transparency. Finally, just a little history lesson on how we got here. So I don't know how long you'd have to go back, maybe 10 years, and the world didn't really offer the choices of short-term vacation rentals, 15 for sure. The paradigm change that happened since that time has been one of the large paradigm changes in the history of city housing stock, vacation choices, that type of thing. And I don't think it would be a secret to say that the city sat on its hands for much too long. If we would have started this process 10 years ago, or let's be more fair, if we would have started this process 5 years ago, some of the choices were being offered now way too late of where we could have emulated other cities that started earlier on this and worked on a way to have low impact programs that cap them in neighborhood zones might have been workable. We are so far past that with the community and the neighborhoods right now that it's not even possible. They are, at least in the coastal zone, in every neighborhood, affecting neighborhoods negatively, worse than people hear about because people are living with them, and conveniently or ironically, the very people who are stakeholders in this and the online platforms ignored this growth. They went through the cracky decision and they just basically rubbed their hands and said, look at the opportunity we had, all the while looking at other cities were having the same problem and it was being addressed earlier. The industry sat back and just allowed this to get worse and worse, had an opportunity to get in early and say, how can we work with you to craft something that you can go out and sell to your community, and never did that. And so today, we're almost to the point where it's none or something. And I think the something is the answer we're looking for. So that gets me off the soapbox, thankfully. Oh, a word on the Planning Commission. So the Planning Commission in this role advises the City Council. And I will tell you, and I am the liaison forever, 7 years, to the Planning Commission. So I see mostly every hearing. This process this time started at the council with direction and input given to staff to go forward and bring it back to council. That direction and input was ignored by the Planning Commission in many of their comments and recommendations, contrary to what the council directed. So to expect this to have to go back, or it should go back, or why isn't it going back to the Planning Commission, the answer from me is that they've had their bite at the apple. They offered up their opinions. Many or some of their opinions were contrary to what council had originally directed. And now we've moved on from that point, and we are sitting in the direction seat again, as it should be. The Planning Commission is appointed, we're elected. I get to hear from the neighborhood residents, the Planning Commission does not. So I'll go through your list now, get off the soapbox. I pretty much mirror Councilmember Sneddon. I have some little differences, so I appreciate the work done on getting them out of the high fire hazard areas. That's actually, I didn't quite remember that there were some of those up behind the shopping center, and so I think that's a welcome change. I'm still amazed at the little donut hole in that area too, that just has boggled me in every fire conversation we've had and how it gets there. I think there will be trouble with the nuance of show proof of insurance versus name the city as an additional insured on a residential homeowner's insurance policy. I might have a little bit experience in that every day, but I would be surprised if fill in the blank on a national insurance carrier that writes homeowner insurance would be ready to offer up an additional insured endorsement on a homeowner policy to the city of Santa Barbara for a customer of theirs renting out their house. So that can be a goal if you want, but I think you ought to find out if that basically just takes everybody out of the pool and there's nothing left there. I think so I need some help here, but to your comment on easing parking restrictions, I think the easing of parking restrictions we're talking about is allowing only legal non-conforming. Because otherwise, if you had legal non-conforming, the way it was written before, no, we would have said you have to come up to today's code on parking. Is that right? I see everybody nodding out there, so I just want to make sure we're not really easing parking restrictions, we're allowing what is legal non-conforming out there to be good enough, okay? Does that make sense? I don't know, I'll let you ask about that afterwards, but I just don't want to get messed up in that word ease, because I think we're just acknowledging that there's places out there that existed since dinosaurs that we are willing to accept, and the easing would be you don't have to provide any parking, or whatever. I personally continue to have no problem with multiple, a compliant and permitted owner having multiple locations in the acceptable areas. I don't I mean, I am focused on protecting that green area in District 2 and offering an opportunity other places. And if somebody wants to pursue multiple opportunities in those other places, what's the difference between one person pursuing multiple or multiple people pursuing one? I mean, just my input. So the permit process and the home shares and, you know, I don't know that anybody knows the answer to this question, but I don't know that this will get through California Coastal Commission. Nobody does. I'm not going to not attempt to put through what I think the best achievable option would be in terms of the city, not the Coastal Commission, but in terms of the city. And I think what's being proposed right now is about the best we could hope for. And if it has to come back, it has to come back. And so I also think that our offer of home shares throughout the area is the part of the carrot to the California Coastal Commission. And to take it out would pretty much drastically change those carrots that are being offered to the Coastal Commission to say, yeah, we can see a pathway for you there. So that concerns me that we definitely would be back here. And clearly, if we're back here for whatever reason, the next iteration of this will be into single-family neighborhood zones, because that will be the only choice left. It won't be go figure out a way to do more in commercial zones. It will be you're coming into single-family neighborhood zones. And that is not, personally not acceptable, and not acceptable to the people that put me in office in that area. So I want everything in this package that could potentially get us to approval by the Coastal Commission while still protecting neighborhood homes, single-family neighborhoods, until the Coastal Commission officially tells us that's not good enough, and then we're forced to do something else. Let me make sure I checked all the boxes in your staff report. And I agree with the comments that Councilmember Sneddon made on there's a potential for a bunch of these anywhere. And again, the balance to be looked at here is what can we offer and what will be acceptable to the California Coastal Zone and what will be acceptable to our neighborhoods. There's not really a balance there because there's 3 parties involved. So it has to be some little form or figure that I don't know what that is, where you have to have a 3-way balance. A stool with 3 legs. I hate that one, but okay. But I think it's very complicated and difficult to say this has to be balanced, because 1, somebody else is approving it, and 2, some of our goals are frankly probably against some of their goals. And but I think we have a responsibility that overarching that people who have lived, people who have moved into single-family residential zones expect a residential zone with neighbors, not a commercial zone with the comings and goings and trappings of either hotels, short-term vacation rentals, liquor stores, whatever else that would be. And that's my goal. So did I get everything on the list? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. So some comments were made about, some of the things that we were covering here being nitpicking or overly complicating the issue. But I just want to reiterate to all of you out there that we up here took an oath And that oath made public safety our number one priority. So that might not seem like a big deal to some of you, but that boils down to simple things like having signs by doors that say this is an exit and that's not an exit, to making sure buildings have fire extinguishers, fire escapes, defibrillators to save people's lives. So as mundane as it might seem to go over parking requirements, it all boils down to our obligation and our oath to making sure that our community is safe. Also, one of the commenters said that because of my incident that happened to me personally was 10 years ago and things have changed, I've asked for updated data. And another obligation that we're held to is transparency. So if somebody were to ask me about data having to do with who we serve as a city, we are legally obligated to give you that data, that information. But no matter how many times I ask Airbnb for this information, they say they don't have it, which I know isn't accurate because their whole thing is data. And the speaker brought up, with AI, it would be even more difficult. So I asked AI about this issue specifically, and it cited a Harvard Business School study that states that they found that requests from guests with distinctly African American names were about 16% less likely to be accepted than otherwise identical guests with white-sounding names. There was another study done that examined New York City listings, found non-black hosts charged approximately 12% more than black hosts for comparable rentals, even after controlling for factors such as location and property quality. Additional research found that white hosts tend to receive reviews more quickly than black or Asian hosts, which can create advantages because reviews help build trust and visibility on the platform. Let me just add a point that obviously this is having to do with New York, and it was about 10 years ago. But again, the bottom line is I've asked Airbnb for specific information, current information about Santa Barbara, and they refuse to do it. And to me, that's a huge red flag about what kind of business model it is and who they're really serving and whether or not we're going to enable that. Because again, we have an obligation to be as equitable as possible and to make sure that the public safety is our number one priority. So I don't want to, unless they're willing to comply and just give us the information that we're asking for, I'm not willing to change anything. And I agree with my colleague about housing being so scarce that even if it's a little room that's available, that could go to somebody who lives and works here. So as of now, I'm not in support of encouraging this business practice any more than it is. The majority of projects that are being built around town, actually I shouldn't say that a majority, but a lot are hotels, So to say that we're in lack of hotels or anything like that is just not accurate. And so that's what I got to say. So if one of my colleagues wants to make a motion, I encourage them to do so. Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon, if you want to make a comment.
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez. So I wanted to add, too, that I do think it is an unmet need, the low-fare accommodations in the coastal zone. And outside of this process, and I think to address the Coastal Commission's maybe what their interests are, too, I think we should be looking at an inclusionary component of any new hotel development, that they have a certain number of units that are affordable, and that we have that in the coastal zone so that we're meeting that need. And I think another really unmet need, because it's absolutely true when you're traveling with your family, it's really not great to have to rent like 3 different rooms and you can't see each other. You're trying to coordinate things versus renting a space that is the size of a house. Well, hotels should meet that need and be looking at having suites that are larger, that feel more home-like. and
Mayor
are-
Pro Tem, we're going a little
Hotels.
astray for the.
Yes, but for comments for the Coastal Commission that they might be interested in, that we might pursue other ways to meet the need of low-cost accommodations in the coastal zone. And I'll leave it as a comment of that, that this doesn't need to be how we're meeting that need with homes that should be homes. So that's mine. And I don't know if do you need us to make sort of individual recommendations with votes, or do you have enough with comments to move this forward to council, or how do we want to do?
Are you concerned about that insurance thing?
I trust that you have insight
That's a bad
into
sign.
this, that I feel like there should be insurance requirement, but I don't feel that it needs to cover the city. I think it needs to adequately cover the property itself.
How about if we said we'd move along the recommendations, but show the option and have the discussion at council for both additional insured status and just proof status? Would you be happy with that?
Yes,
Okay, so you ready?
I'm in.
So I'll move staff recommendations and just add in addition to anything else you heard in the comments today that were tweaks that make sense to you. And in that context, that when it comes to council, you show that insurance section is 2 options. One, that you're insured and you offer the city an additional insured status via certificate, or other, that you just show the city that you have insurance on the property. Does that work?
May I ask a clarifying
Sure.
question too on that? Because, so what we asked staff to do is explain why the number of licenses or operators is limited. So if you're moving staff recommendation, I'm not sure that staff had a recommendation on that. I'm
catch.
recommending keeping them limited. Is
So
that-
well, how about we'll add another option to that
Okay.
motion, and that would be just the option of both limiting ownership of short-term vacation rentals to one person only, whatever it is, or allowing the same person entity to own multiple locations. And we can discuss that on the fly at council also. Does that work?
It works, and I would
Okay.
just recommend that it keeps the analysis that was in the report that was given to us today, because I think that was very informative on why we would want to limit them.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just have one question, and that has to do with the home share direction conceptually. And small minor plug is that is pretty important to the Coastal Commission to spread them through the coastal zone. So I think I heard Councilwoman Sneddon say she wasn't happy with that, but.
I'm not attached to them one way or the other, if it
So
helps
could you
with the
include that in your consensus?
Oops. So we'll leave them in.
So we're good as presented by staff,
Okay.
I guess. I didn't see her staring at me hard, so I figured she'd be okay.
Second. Yeah, I second. Yeah.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Can we have that read back to us, please?
I'll do my best. Motion moved by Committee Member Jordan, seconded by Committee Member Sneddon, that the Ordinance Committee will review and forward to City Council ordinance amendments to Title 30 Inland Zoning Ordinance and Title 28 Coastal Zoning Ordinance related to short-term rentals and home shares. B, recommend amending the local coastal program to amend Title 28 Coastal Zoning Ordinance related to the short-term rentals and home shares, Santa Barbara Municipal Chapter 28.92. C, determine the short-term rental ordinances are exempt from California Environmental Quality Act, also known as CEQA, pursuant to CEQA guidelines, Section 15061, Section B3. and determine that the short-term rental ordinance are consistent with the general plan and local coastal plan. In addition, to show options for both additional insurance status and proof of status and limiting ownership options, but that's where I stop. Close enough, okay. So we can go ahead and take a vote. Does it come up? It's not coming up?
Well, apparently we all voted.
Did that come up for you?
It
Is that
did.
your,
That's not our vote, though.
okay, sorry, let's try that again. And that, it's entered, it's just not showing a color.
Okay, so according to the bottom left-hand corner, that passes 2 yes, 1 no.
Can we have a voice vote, please?
Me.
Yeah, we'll do a verbal. So based on that motion, Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
Councilmember Sneddon,
Well, I'm going to say yes, but of course, I'm very interested in I'm voting yes.
okay.
Yes.
Chair Gutierrez,
I would abstain.
okay.
So that passes
Yes.
2 to 1. All right, 2-0-1, sorry. All right, so
Two.
thank you for your attention to this matter. We're going to conclude this meeting.